Hello, good evening and welcome. Here we go again. It is 16th of June 2021. My name is Mark and I'm here for you with The Late Show tonight. Again, it is Wednesday night. Don't go anywhere for the next hour. It's going to be packed and I have got a lovely, lovely guest, a great friend of mine who is Pastor Steve Lloyd of the Bible Prophecy Foundation, pastor of Cranfield Bible Church up in sunny, where is it, Hertfordshire, Steve?
Cranfield in Bedfordshire.
Bedfordshire.
Yeah, sunny Bedfordshire.
He's come a long way tonight. Thank you, Steve, for joining me tonight.
Pleasure.
It's absolutely great. I've known you for a few years. I've been to see you preach many, many times, my son and I. And yeah, it was you basically got the same spirit of Rev TV. You are basically Rev TV, but in Bedfordshire. And it's great to have you tonight, standing in tonight, Stevie. We're going to basically carry on with the same sort of title, the same sort of way that the last programme went. We only found out what the last programme was about 4 minutes ago. Absolutely. As we watched the end. But basically, tonight's programme, Steve, we're going to be talking about, has this last year of COVID, etc., been the open doorway where the Antichrist spirit really starts ramping up? And are we to expect possible Antichrist ramifications coming through now stronger and stronger than ever? Steve, one of the things you've first said to me was that even when you were young, when you was a young Christian, you really felt that you'd see the Lord return in your lifetime, didn't you, Steve? Just give us a bit about your background and where you come from.
Absolutely. I became a Christian when I was 15 years old. And all the way through my Christian life, I felt that I would see the Lord come again, that I, in a sense, wouldn't die. I've come through various jobs. I've been a firefighter for 13 years. I've been in the police for 23 years doing bits, not all the policemen. And now I'm a pastor, and all of that has come through. And, you know, my passion, in a sense, is talking about this sort of thing. Obviously, the gospel comes first, but, you know, get me on this subject and we'll be here all night, so to speak. So, yeah, we're very much at one together, very much at one.
Oh, bless you, Steve. Well, let's start where we need to start. This Antichrist figure, mentioned in Thessalonians, various other places, is often portrayed in films, etc. Damien, the Omen 666, lots of places he seems to pop up. But we're starting to be prepped now, I believe, Steve. I'm starting to see the stage being set. What needs to happen for this Antichrist figure to arise, in your opinion? What needs to be happening on the earth? Just give us a bit of a ballpark description of what needs to be happening.
I think before you actually answer that, or get to that, we need to, if you like, understand what is the goal of the Antichrist. You know, what's he trying to be, if you like. And I mean, we could say, well, of course, the Bible talks about an Antichrist could be anybody that is anti-Christ. But of course, the Antichrist is someone who is Satan. It's the dragon. We're told that. In Revelation 12, it says the great dragon that was hurled down, he is Satan. He is the Antichrist. And so what does he want to achieve? Well, again, Revelation 13 tells us about what seems to describe a system of control. We talk about the number 666, we talk about those things and the need to have this number in order to buy and sell and all of those things. He wants to have control. That's his aim. He wants to, in a sense, put himself as God. And we know that, according to Paul's writings, he is going to set himself up in the temple and he is going to act as God, and to everybody around him, he will be God. That's his aim. So, you know, those things will come to pass because it's written in Scripture. So what do we need to see happening? Well, we need to see those things being put in place. If you were to build a house and you were going to put electricity in, you wouldn't just go up to a switch and switch it on. You have to put in the wiring first. You have to put in the fuse boxes, the switches, the sockets. And when it's all in and ready and tested, then you switch it on. And I think that's what we're seeing now. Is we're seeing all of these things being put into place so that when the Antichrist comes on the scene, and he could be amongst us now, we don't know, but he could be amongst us, and he comes in and bang, off we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do we need to see? Well, that's an interesting one, really, because we've actually been seeing things happening for a lot longer than just these last 15 months. These last 15 months have been a real exceptional year, if you like, of things happening. But before that, we've seen things coming in, you know, like the breakdown of the nations. We saw the EU allowing all people to come in from all sorts of places, and it's destabilising the nations. the EU was all about getting rid of nationalism. And of course, once you get rid of the nationalism, a person has nothing to fight for. Do you know what I mean? So he's easier to control. So we've been seeing that coming in for some time. But the thing is that the Antichrist needs to be able to control every part of our lives. And in order to do that, he's got to have things in place. And so what we're starting to see now is the digitization of everything. Everything is getting online. We're being encouraged to do things in a different way. And all of these things they all look good on the outside. I mean, the whole message of COVID has been that it's for our good, it's to save the NHS, and it pulls on those heartstrings to do that. And so everything we're doing now, I mean, we've heard slogans about, you won't own anything but you'll be happy. Well, if you've gone to buy a car, for instance, over these last few years, they don't actually want you to buy it. They want you to have a thing where you rent it, basically, and then you give it back. But you're happy with that because you've got your car and it's not costing you any more than perhaps it would, but then it has to go back. So that's in their control still. And we're seeing that with all sorts of things, So that's going on. The control of food is another thing, really. I mean, if you go into your high street shop, your Sainsbury's, your Tesco's, whoever it is, and you look along all the produce, it comes from just about every single country in the world. So what happens if the airline stops, the transport system stops? Your food stops.
Yes.
So again, they've got you there.
It's like mass interdependency, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, again, we see that thing happening. And then, of course, there's the fear side of things. Now, we know that COVID is real. We know it, and it's had an awful effect on many people. But it's been made worse by the hyped fear that's encouraging us to do things that we perhaps wouldn't normally do. We've got used to, if you like, flu, and we live with flu. And every year we go through the same thing, but we've lived with it. There's never been that hype of fear over flu. So why have we got this fear now? So, you get the feeling that this is being used by those behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
To take us down another road.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're seeing.
I think we're seeing the beginning. Do you know what, Steve? We've been, for probably the last decade and a half, we've all been sort of prepped, really, with a new way of thinking. And the eradication of opinions and your ability to express yourself, and with all this cultural Marxist sort of agenda that we've been seeing, and intersectionality, and you must be offended on behalf of someone else, and you can't be happy unless you're offended about something. It's actually now getting out of control.
Absolutely.
It's actually now. The whole driver behind this, Steve, is a sort of a communistic mindset which says actually that there is no God. That the whole point of the Antichrist spirit is to take the place of God and to eradicate God. So, what better way to come in through the back door than in a sort of a communistic mindset which eradicates God completely? Your Judeo-Christian heritage and values are slowly eradicated. You're coerced and encouraged to believe other things. And things which we would see as Christians as pretty much horrific are gradually offered to us, Steve, and proffered to us as normal, good, really good, and you're supposed to go along with the agenda, Steve, aren't you? You're supposed to accept it, want it, and we're now at the stage where you're supposed to be celebrating things which most people find strange. So much so that, so we've gone so far down the road now, Steve, that you can identify as who and what you want to be. We're starting to get into strange areas now, Steve, and I think that's what has been happening for the last 10 or 15 years. Your thoughts and your words have been censored up to a point, and I think now what we're seeing now is the quickening of that. Would you go along with that, Steve?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen really over the last, let's say, decade, a real breakdown of the society that we have lived with so long, that has been built on Christian values and that sort of thing, where, you know, you knew what was right, you knew what was wrong, you knew where you were, and everything was built upon that. And we've seen that steadily eroded away. You know, what we would call the nuclear family is basically being eroded away, and everything is coming into it that you know, children these days, you know, they don't necessarily have what we would call a normal, stable family in the traditional way. You know, things are so different, and you know, even things like divorce and that have come in. You know, there's no need to work at a marriage anymore, because, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll just get rid and carry on. And so all of these things have been sort of taken away from it. It's like they're taking the carpet from under your feet type thing. They're getting rid of all those things that we have considered normal and considered the foundation that we all stand upon.
Yeah.
Even honesty. You know, what is honesty anymore? Well, you know, have to say, unfortunately, our government will say one thing 1 minute and another thing they'll say something totally different. Well, what's going on?
Absolutely.
So absolutely, you know, the whole thing is going down, you know, and down.
It is. Foundations, you mentioned the word foundations there, Steve. Psalm 11:3, when the foundations are removed, what can the righteous do? And I think this is what we're seeing now. We've been slowly prepped over a decade and a half with all these ways of thinking, ways of doing. Now everyone is fear-filled, basically. And then came along March 2020. Now, I want to make it very, very clear before we get onto this subject, neither Steve and I are COVID deniers. No. We're not anti-vax. I've had a fair share of vaccines in my life, and I dare say Steve has too. But what I'm telling you tonight is that this is our point of view, okay? Now, as with all things, vaccines, COVID, the lot, you do whatever you do, you feel with the Lord, okay? We're not sitting here to tell you, we're not saying like Jeff said, thus saith the Lord. But what we are telling you is what we feel has been going on in the last 15 months. So where you are with the Lord, with this situation, you go with whatever you feel the Lord is showing you, okay? There is no right or wrong, but this is what we feel. And do you know what? The moment this reared its head last March, I was on the phone to one of the management of Rev TV, and I was excited, Steve. I said to her, I said, this is it. I think this is the start. This is the beginning. This is the takedown. And I think we were very blessed in our family, Steve. All 5 of us, we could see this before it even reared its ugly head. We could see where this was going. And people like me 15 months ago were exactly the type that the media has spent the last 15 months saying, oh, that's over the top. You're a conspiracy theorist. It'll never reach there. Now, COVID, as you said, is real. Thousands of lives affected. Absolutely, absolutely. I'm not saying no to that whatsoever. Howard sits there with me every week. Praise God, he's recovered. He's running around kicking a football again at 75. And by the grace of God, he's still here. Brother Alan, who used to sit here and do the Bible study year after year, an intrinsic part of Revelation TV, young and healthy young man. He died of COVID. So, yeah, we're not saying it's not real, far from it. But what we are offering to you tonight is a viewpoint that says, I think, and Steve thinks, there is a horrifically dark agenda, antichrist-fueled, running behind this, concurrent and running. It's almost the fuel of it. And like all things, many of you will know my testimony, so I'm used to living in fear. I'm used to living in heightened anxiety. And funny enough, Steve, I think the Lord has used that heightened anxiety of the last 30 years to actually recognise this very quickly. And I'm very, very grateful, Steve. I really am very grateful. What we've seen is a state-controlled, state-funded programme of absolute propaganda, fear, terror, death, doom, the lot. Pick any adjective you want. I've run out, I only got an English O-level grade, so I've run out of adjectives for death and doom, terror, destruction. And we've had that played on our screens, newspapers, magazines, bus stops, everywhere you go, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And quite frankly, I'm very grateful I haven't been taken in by it. Many, many people have, Steve. And I do believe that fear and anxiety are Satan's calling cards to bring a world under submission. What do you think?
I think you're totally right. I think this is a thing that we know as the Hegelian dialect. Okay, this is, if you like, a process where you have a problem. Now that problem either comes out of the blue and it's a natural problem, or it's a made problem. Okay, and what happens then is that the problem gets a reaction from the public, and the reaction that the public want the government, if you like, or those in charge, to then do something about it. And so the government then bring in a solution. But of course, if the government have made the problem, the government are going to bring in the solution that they already wanted to bring in. And this is the way that they've gone about this. So they've used a situation and they have, if you like, hyped it up to such a degree that we are crying out for them to do whatever, and we will accept whatever. And so that they come along to start with and said, right, we're gonna flatten this curve, we're gonna hit it to save the NHS. Well, we all love our NHS, and we don't want to see that go down. And we all got behind the nurses, we clapped on a Thursday night and all of those things, because that gave us all purpose, if you like, didn't it? But that was all part of what was going on. And so we then accepted quite easily these lockdowns. You know, and everyone, even today, after 15 months of lockdown, people will say, oh, we've got to do it because we've got to break it. And then when he comes and says, well, we're not going to open up on June the 21st, it's now going to be July the 19th, everyone's going, oh, but it's only another 4 weeks. We can do it, you know. And we've lost all sense of the fact that, hang on, this was only supposed to last 3 weeks, and now we're into 16 months. And there still is no end. Will we be released in July? Who knows? Because of what's going on. And so you've got this coming out. They've exploited the problem and they've highlighted it. And we saw it on the news that, you know, when it started, we saw the death toll rise. And of course, it's not nice to see the death toll rise, but when the death toll rise started to slow down, instead of just putting deaths on, they started to change it to cases. And so the number kept going up and up and up and up. And so everyone's thinking, oh, it's getting worse, it's getting worse, it's getting worse. But actually, the death rate was going down. So they hyped it all up. And as you quite rightly said, every news bulletin had something about COVID in. There was no let up with it. And it was like being browbeaten with it. And it still is.
It still is.
It still is. And so, you know, if you like, you get to that point where you go, do you know what, I've had enough. We'll just go with the crowd.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening.
It is, Steve. I remember on our little Zoom meeting we did about a month ago, you had someone who did a Freedom of Information inquiry last June, didn't you?
I did.
And I remember the stats. Your friend asked, basically, whoever they asked for this Freedom of Information inquiry, and asked, basically, how many people had died of COVID itself with no underlying health issues, no comorbidities that normal flu would help you finish off with. And by June, the number 10 Downing Street was their little toll on the television that would run underneath just rolling through the weather, through every little 50,000 people have died, which on the forefront of it looks horrific and is horrific.
Yeah.
Steve, you told us that the answer your friend got, people that had died of COVID alone with no underlying health issues, was not 50,000, it was 4,800.
That's right, yeah. And that was at the 50,000 mark.
Yeah.
So we're up to about 100, let's call it, to make it maths easier, we're up to about 160,000 now. Yeah. So if you multiply the 4,800 by 4, you get a true figure. That actually it's not 160,000, it's more like 16,000. Now that's bad enough, you know, but to make it sound even worse than that is, in my view, criminal, you know, because, you know, people who have got things wrong with them, we don't know what would have happened to them normally, but just on COVID alone, you know, the figures don't add up.
Stephen, did you notice, by the way, the government, they actually don't try and hide anything from you.
No.
They actually put it, we are so, well, I wasn't, but people are so terrified that they're literally sitting at home thinking death, destruction and doom. Now, they actually took all flu deaths away. All flu deaths suddenly became COVID deaths, and the World Health Organization reported how many flu deaths? 0. So suddenly flu has now morphed into COVID. And then they start telling us that anyone that died, and they actually write it on the screen, anyone that died for any reason within 28 days of a positive test. So if you got run over by a 51 bus in Orpington, okay, you died of COVID. If you'd had a positive test within 28 days. So, and then in late July, they summarily took 5,000 off of the death figures because they said, oh, we're really sorry, but we did a bit too much higgledy-piggledy, and we're going to take 5,000 off because we've over-egged it a little bit. And I've never forgotten the average amount of deaths, Steve, that the UK has from flu per year is normally between 14 and 20,000 deaths of flu.
Yeah.
And guess what? The average age of death for COVID in the UK is about 82 and a half, which I think is probably older than the average age expectancy.
Well, I think the age expectancy is 81.
81.
So, yeah.
So,
difference.
And then they go to tell you that over 90%, if this is really rubbing you up the wrong way, I'm sorry, but these are government stats. So I know there will be people at home now throwing eggs at the TV, throwing cups of tea at the TV. Oh, you're scaring us. No, I'm trying to address the fear that we've all had. 90% of those 82-year-olds had between 1 and 3 serious comorbidities.
Yeah.
You know, a serious lung condition, whatever. There's loads of things, cardiac situations. That at that age, flu itself is a normal threat.
Yes.
Steve, have we been fed a bit of a line?
I think we have, and let me just give you a couple of facts that go back to the very beginning of this. First of all, Boris, on the day that he announced the first lockdown, the government's own website had already downgraded the pandemic. So, you know, we've downgraded the pandemic, and yet he's now putting us into lockdown. So there's the first thing that says, hang on, what's going on here? And apparently it says that it was based on the consideration that the high consequence infectious disease criteria was no longer being met. Well, okay, so in that case, why did we carry on with it? The second fact is that the Coronavirus Act that was laid before Parliament was laid before Parliament, I believe, on the 19th of March last year, okay? And it passed through without a vote on the 23rd of March. And it got through the Lords again on the 25th of March. So from the 19th through to the 25th, it had got royal assent. Never before has something gone through that quick, you know, and especially without a vote. So they must have had that ready to go very quickly. But the other thing is that, you know, Matt Hancock told the House of Commons on March the 16th that people would have to avoid contact with each other. And then on March the 23rd, Boris announced to the country that we're going on to lockdown. But also on the 19th, when he said about the contact, we'd already downgraded it. So there's something just not right here. And that's at the very beginning. And then we look at SAGE. Now, SAGE is the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies. We've heard of them before. But the interesting thing on this particularly is that what has happened is they have started a psychological war on the people of this country, and there is a psychological wing, and funnily enough, it's called Spy B, and it's full of people that are into the psychology and the policing of things such as riots and all of those things. So, what was the point of that? What you know? If they're expecting us to, or they want us to behave in a certain way, then they've got the people in there that show us the way to do it. And there was I don't know whether it was a leaked document, but it was certainly put out on the internet from SAGE. I did have a copy here somewhere, of all the things that they would do. And one of the things was that if they didn't comply with a certain thing, that they would then get the media in to make things worse so that they would comply. So a lot of this stuff has been well thought out beforehand. It's not like, you know, right, we've got a pandemic, let's sort the pandemic out, let's sort the hospitals out, let's get that done. This is more psychological, and they've worked it through the whole of the media and in the hype that they've done. So I think the answer is yes, we are being duped. But, you know, they've used something that is real, and they're taking it so much further than it needs to go.
Absolutely, Steve. Steve, I remember back in the very early days when you'd have the threesome standing there, you know, at number 10 Downing Street with their morose voices and their desperately concerned faces. And it was very clear. It was absolutely clear. We're in an age, Steve, when you can send men to the moon, and we can do all sorts of things scientifically. And Professor Van Tam got up and said very clearly, the science is very, very clear. For anyone that's healthy, the use of masks not needed whatsoever. It neither stops you getting it, neither stops passing you on. For healthy people, there's no need for masks whatsoever. The Attorney General back in America back last year was telling people don't go and buy masks. Even Dr. Fauci, up until I think it was the 4th, till April the 3rd. April the 3rd, Dr. Fauci over in America, absolutely no need for masks. The science is clear. 2 months later, the science is not very clear now, and the agenda has been ramped up a few notches. And all of a sudden, Steve, we're all having to walk around muzzled. What do you think on that? Because we've got science here that changes as when and as they need. You've got Professor Neil Ferguson with his massively over-exaggerated numbers. Oh, 500,000 could be dead, you know. And if you're someone sitting at home, I mean, this would scare you senseless, wouldn't it? And it has. It scared a population senseless. And I've sat there and I've looked at these figures and I've looked at these people and I've seen the darkness, Steve, that emanates from them. Absolutely emanates. I remember watching Matt Hancock on Good Morning Britain just when the vaccines had come out. And apparently he started crying with tears of joy. And I'm looking at the TV, Steve, and I'm sitting there looking at TV, and Matt Hancock apparently started crying. He's so joyous. He's so happy. There was no tears. The bloke was almost laughing. It was absolutely atrocious. Steve, you've read all these books, you know, George Orwell and, you know, Animal Farm and all these things. These guys were on the ball, weren't they? We are being shepherded on the broad path, I believe, to destruction. The antichrist spirit is prevalent now. And we have got politicians that are literally leading by diktat. They go to bed one night, wake up the next day, what should we do today? What new rules should we impose today? And we'll always say it's always backed up by science. Well, unfortunately, it isn't always backed up by science, because you look at hundreds and hundreds of scientists around the world, PhDs after their name, that actually, Steve, are they're starting to look up, put their brave heads above the parapet, risk their livelihoods, risk their medical licenses and say, do you know what? All may not be well. Steve, we're starting to have to be brave now, aren't we? The rubber's now starting to hit the road, because when it affects your freedoms and or your finances, this is where fear will either drive you to the Lord or drive you into the hands of men.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think this has now gone on too far. I mean, everyone looked at the masks to start with and thought, okay, you know, this will help us. But there has been so much, so many reports on that done now that show that actually a mask is of no use at all. We've also done other things, haven't we? I mean, we opened up the disco in Liverpool with so many thousand people going. We've got people going to events with, like, you can go to the football with 12,000 people going. No problem. But you can't go to a wedding and have a little dance together, you know, because that's silly. I was preaching in a church just a few weeks ago, and everyone was sitting there, as the rules say, in their mask, in their family little bubbles, keeping away from each other. A song comes up on the thing and we have to just sit
and watch the words.
Watch the words. And I had to, when I was going to preach, I actually started by saying, it's quite ironic, isn't it, that we're doing all of this, and yet I can go down the road to a restaurant, have my mask off, have a great time with my friends, and all is well.
Yeah, all is well.
And yet here we are, unable to sing praises to God and do the things we normally do, even in a safe environment. So it's absolutely ludicrous. But I think people are now, well, you've still got two types of people. You've got the people that are going around who are still fearful, you know, going along a road in the open air, but wearing a mask because they're so fearful. And now you've got the others who are opening up and going, hang on a minute, there's something wrong here. I want my freedoms back. You know, this has been 15 months, especially in the height of summer. And in fact, I believe the chair or the spokesperson for the 1922 committee said the other day, if we don't open up now, then we might just about open up for August, but they'll shut us down again in September. Now, if he's saying that, what's Boris going to do? This is not going to stop.
Yeah.
And I think the people need to realise that this is not going to stop, and we need to realise that we have to live with this like we do with flu and other things and get on with living. But as you say, the darkness is overcoming all of that. And I believe personally that the darkness really came into this country back in the Olympics of 2012.
Yeah, you were saying.
Because the opening and closing ceremonies were so around witchcraft. And if you remember, everyone was asked to ring a bell on the opening day. Whether it was a cycle bell, your doorbell, the church bells, everybody just ring bells. Well, if you know anything about witchcraft, you know that ringing of bells is a means of summoning up the demonic. So did we, as a nation, unknowingly perhaps, summon up a darkness that has now overtaken this country?
I think
Could
it is.
be.
I really think so.
You know, and we're seeing now no, it's not a government, because our parliament don't seem to be having any say in anything at the moment. It's a group of about 5 guys who are going, as you say, what should we do today? Let's do this. You know, they've come out today and said care home staff will will have the injection. Has that gone through Parliament? Has that been voted on? Is that being put? No. So we're now in a bit of a totalitarian sort of system where 2 or 3 people will do, as you say, what they get up and think about in the morning. Right, we're going to do that today, and that's the way we go. But, you know, the British people, unfortunately, will just go with it because that's what we do.
Yeah. Stephen, you're right. Do you know what, just going back to Mars for a second, the CDC, the Centre for Disease Control in America, who are like the equivalent of Public Health England, last week basically told Americans that the lateral flow tests that they all rely so heavily on are pretty much a joke, a complete useless entity with so many false negatives, false positives. It is just a lottery. And the American public were advised just to send them back to the manufacturer or throw them in the bin. And all we're fed now, Steve, is there's a variant over here, there's a variant over there, there's a Great Yarmouth variant, Brazilian variant, there's a North Reykjavik variant. There's variants everywhere, trying to keep that fear going, Steve. But quite frankly, the more people you test, the more weird and wonderful results you're going to get. And I think we have to start realising that infection is not disease. And we're treated to all these lovely little words like asymptomatic, and the biggest joke one is pre-symptomatic. If you're pre-symptomatic, it probably means you're totally healthy, so you're nothing to do with anything. And asymptomatic is, you know, where you can pass on the infection while you're showing no symptoms, etc. And you can go on YouTube and watch the lady representative for the World Health Authority last year saying that basically asymptomatic transmission is so negligible, it's virtually non-existent, it's nothing, it just doesn't happen. Right? She obviously went back to her paymasters that night, was given a flea in her ear, threatened with something, and she was back on there the next day just to readdress her words, saying, oh, maybe asymptomatic transmission is something that we do have to worry about. And you can just see, it's almost like a play now, Steve. It's like a theatre. And they're getting up with coming out with these ever more wondrous things that they can say. And like you say now we're starting to see a dark side, because now we're starting to be threatened with compulsory, mandatory vaccines. And I will just say, here's another government stat for you, not my own. Infection to mortality rate for this is, well, the way that it's being described, if you as an alien landed from Mars, you'd think this has got like 40, 50% mortality rate, like Ebola. It's 0.3.
Yeah.
So let's get this in perspective. Yeah. It is 0.3. Anyway, so now, with this disease with a 0.3% mortality rate, which ranks at about number 24 on the World Health Organization's most transmissible and deadly diseases, and if that's the case, why haven't we shut the world for the top 23? Quite sure about that one. Now we're starting to be threatened with no job, no jab. No job, no holiday.
Yeah.
No job, who knows where it's going to go next. No job, no shopping down at Asda's. Can't show your little vaccine card, your ID 2020 card. Maybe you can't come in and buy your bread today. Do you know what, Steve? I was under the impression that as an individual human being on this earth, we have 4 inalienable rights. Freedom of thought, which has been all but eradicated. Freedom of speech, which is running out the door quicker than Linford Christie. Yep. Freedom of movement, which is now under threat with apparent COVID vaccine passports. And are you allowed to go on holiday? Amber light, green, red. Oh, we'll change it to amber while you're out in Portugal. We'll change it to red. When you come back, you've got to quarantine, even though you didn't have to when you... It is a joke. And the final one, which really makes me smile, we have bodily autonomy, which means that if I don't want you to administer to me medicines, injections, whatever you want, I don't have to have it. And this goes back to the Nuremberg trial, Steve, the European Court of Human Rights. Those two functions themselves state very clearly that it is absolutely illegal to socially, financially coerce any individual into taking a medicine against their will, no matter what. We are heading into dark times, aren't we, Steve?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the Nuremberg trials are the things that set that in motion. And so you're quite right. You know, we are being coerced on just about every level. But the thing is, it's not just the coercion, it's getting people turning against people. You know, we're having, you know, these discussions about should the people who have not had a vaccine be basically locked away so that others, you know, who have had the vaccine can get on with their lives. I mean, you know, this has come out from past prime ministers in the last week or so. They've said that very same thing, you know. And so coercion is a big thing. And again, one of the things that you have to ask yourself is, if this pandemic is as bad as it is, why do we need to do so much coercion to get people to do what they think they should do? You know, we would all do what we need to do to keep people safe. You know, no matter what I think about the situation, if I was to come to your door knowing that you were, you know, a worried person and all that, I would give you the respect of keeping my distance and doing the things that we need to do, because I want to keep you safe. I'm not selfish if I don't want you know, to take the vaccine. I am looking after me, but if you take the vaccine, then you're looking after you. I mean, it is that choice. So it's not about this selfish argument that people bring up. It is, as you say, people have a choice and they should make an informed choice. And part of the problem is people just follow the crowd. But I would say to everybody, you know, it's your choice what you do, but research it. Don't just blindly go into it. Research it so you know what you're getting into.
Amen, Steve.
You know, you don't just go and buy a car for the sake of buying a car. You look for the car you want. You look to see what it's got. You make an informed choice.
Amen, Steve.
It's the same, you know, with that.
Amen. Let me just reiterate what Steve said. We're not here telling you what to do. That is far from what we're telling you what to do. You go to the Lord, you search the scriptures, you search the information, you search everything you want to search. But this is where we and Steve are coming from. Many, many people are coming from this angle now, have been for many, many months. So it's up to you. It's between you and God. I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm just telling you why I am going down the road that I am and that Steve is. This vaccine, up to you. I've took vaccines before, Steve.
Yeah, so have I.
They're tried and tested.
Yes.
They're tried and tested. The average time for any medicine vaccine to go from research to being given out to the public is normally between 5 and 15 years, sometimes as much as 20 years. So, you know, if you want to tell me, oh, vaccines, this vaccine, that's fine. I've taken a few vaccines in my time, but I knew that they had a safety record. And as usual in America and Britain, the makers are immune from any sort of comeback. They admit you are an experiment. This vaccine is under an emergency license. It's not been officially authorized. It's got emergency authorization. It tells you it is an experiment, and we're supposed to ring in and go on with the little coloured codes to tell them about any side effects they're getting. But quite frankly, I'm happy with looking after myself, vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, get enough sleep. Steve, there's 1,000,001 things that are going to kill us in the end. If we're expecting that we have to have a complete eradication of one disease before we're allowed to go back down to Asda's, you know, mask-free, this is cloud cuckoo land, isn't it?
It's never going to happen. But it's all about getting the balance, isn't it? The balance over the risk. I mean, as someone else has said, we take risks every day. You know, you cross a busy London street, you take a risk. So we're used to taking risks. We weigh those things up, and you look at the balance and go, is it worth it? And I think now that there's a great groundswell of people that are actually saying, do you know what? Yeah, I'm going to take the risk because I want freedom back. And so, you know, there is becoming a change because people have sort of seen that over 15 months, actually, are we any further forward with it? Even with a vaccine, you know, and if we are, then have your vaccine and get on with life.
Yeah.
You know, or don't have your vaccine and get on with life. But either way, it's your life, so live it.
And apparently, Steve, you have the vaccine, and on the bit of paper that tells you, it says that the government website says this might not stop you getting it, and it probably won't stop you transferring it.
Yeah.
So in the end, you wonder why you shelled out a tenner in diesel to go down and get it. Because if it's not protecting you and it's not stopping you giving it to someone else, well, you know, am I losing something here, Steve?
No, you're not. You're absolutely.
I just wonder what's going on in the end.
Because, you know, when it came out, you know, these vaccines had this, what is it, 90% efficacy and all the rest of it, and we were being told that this was the thing that was going to get us out of lockdown. And then as soon as we start to get into the programme of having vaccines, they start backtracking on that and go, well, we don't know whether it will stop you transmitting it or getting it or whatever. Well, you can't have both.
No, you can't.
You know,
this has got more movable goalposts than it's a knockout, hasn't
absolutely.
it? Back in 1988.
Yeah. So, you know, now is the time just to say, right, you know, the majority of people in the country, if we go by the statistics, have now had it. So we've got the amount of people that we need, if you like, to keep it under control. So let's get on with life, you know.
The vulnerable are all double vaccinated.
Absolutely.
I've forgotten the figure, about 29, 30 million people got double vaccinations. Let us make our own risk assessment, and if you want to go and cuddle with your granny, go and cuddle with your granny. You know, this affected members of my family, Steve, that are now basically just brainwashed. That's my own family.
Yeah. The other thing that worries me about all of this is to get to the church in all of this, is where has the church been throughout this? You know, okay, yes, Coronavirus Act 2020 shut us down for a little while, and we rolled over so easily. Now, okay, the first time, I think we would have done it anyway, I think, because we wanted to get this under control. And then, of course, we were let out, I think, in the September. And, you know, I mean, our church opened up straight away. Because my thinking about that was, if we are people of faith, then we should show the world that we have faith. Now, I'm not talking about blind faith, but, you know, you show people that we've got something and someone who we trust in, and we're willing to get back into life and to open the doors. We're here for you. But there are many churches that stayed shut and are still shut. And you say, well, why are you still shut? Well, we're a bit afraid to open. Well, what are you afraid of? Yeah. You know, my God is bigger than all of this. You know?
Steve, you're right. Steve, you're right. Let me just invite you to text and email. And as you thought, we've got a few emails. Come in if you've got opposite view. Come in if you've got an agreeing view, ambivalent view. Just come in any view you want. Let's get through some emails here now. Someone here's calling me Hugh. Well, Hugh's a doctor. He's got a PhD, so I'll have a bit of Hugh tonight. Hello, Hugh. Hugh, I heard the next scare used might be cyber attacks, as they're going to do a simulation of it, as they did for COVID in 2019 in New York. Great show. God bless.
Yes, I mean, I've heard that the next one will be possibly a cyber attack on the financial system.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Well, that would follow.
That would. Amy says, hello, you just mentioned that the British people just go along with it, but that's not necessarily true. There are over 1 million people who are not asleep to all this. Don't worry, Amy, I'm one of them. Yeah. Who go into London every weekend to protest for our fight for our freedoms. You know, I've been there a couple of times. Oh, and there's another bit of higgledy-piggledy maths, Steve. The last freedom rally, I think it was 2 weeks ago, was absolutely, there was hundreds of thousands. And guess what the BBC said in their slight mentioning of it? There was an estimated 350 people that turned up. Yeah. Honestly, you couldn't make this stuff up. The MSM never report this, and they do lie about it. Well, that they do, because you can just have a look at the photos. Hi guys, great show. You both said what I was thinking. We're all being controlled. Satan has orchestrated fear and anxiety very cleverly, blah, blah. I had the vaccine as I work in a care home. I realised I wouldn't be welcome as part of the nursing team if I hadn't had the vaccine. Well, Susan, apparently now, the first coercement that's going mandatory could be you guys. Here we go. Hi, gents. I agree totally with all you said on the subject of vaccines. We are truly in the end times. Wake up, church. Jesus is coming back from Pam. God bless you, Pam. Hip, hip, hooray at last. I'm so glad to finally hear you speak out the truth about what's going on. Not a moment too soon. I agree 1,000% with what you said. Thank you, Marcus Steve. Blessings. Thank you, Caroline. I'm just going through them one by one. Hi, Marcus Steve. Psalm 90, verse 4. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day. Hosea 6:2. After 2 days, he'll revive us, and on the third day, we will live in his presence. 2,000 years from Jesus' death and resurrection will be over in just 8 years' time, with the 7-year trib beginning in October 22. Thank you, Robert. God bless you. Cynthia, a few days ago, Marcus Lamb from Daystar TV, Christian TV, told people not to have the vaccine. We're not doing that. We're saying you do what you want to do between you and God, okay? It is totally, totally up to you, okay? It is totally up to you. Thank you. That's from Cynthia. Thank you, Cynthia. They told us not to wear masks because they wanted them for the NHS. If they'd given us masks to start with, there wouldn't have been so many COVID cases. Also, they sent elderly people back to care homes where they died of COVID because they wanted the hospital beds for the real COVID onslaught, which was happening under their noses in care homes. If you ask me, thank you, Maggie, the government was protecting the NHS from us. Thanks, Maggie. There's an opposite opinion there. God bless you, Mag. Brian says, Babylon means confusion, which is what is being used on the world as COVID 2019 in Daniel's abomination of 1290 days, stand in the holy place, pointed out by Jesus for the last days. Matthew 24:15, who is 1335 of days as God's seed and his law. Well, this is, Brian, it's above my head, and it's I won't be able to get through that in a few moments. Frankie, Belfast, every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of God, and every spirit that does not confess Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of the antichrist, which you heard was coming and is now already in the world. Keep shining bright. Brothers, please take great care in accusing the government of orchestrating the COVID situation. You appear to have lost sight of we wrestle not against flesh and blood, and the government is comprised of men and women. But we do stand against the principalities and powers. Ephesians 6:12 there. We do not fight against the government of this country, but we should be praying urgently for them. Believe me,
Absolutely.
we are.
Absolutely.
For the MPs and the civil service who have been put in place by God for our benefit. Were it not for Boris Johnson's God-given foresight, we would have not had any vaccine ready, and there would have been an overloaded NHS and many, many more deaths of people who would have been robbed of the opportunity to hear the gospel of Jesus is untimely death. We are being duped indeed by the media, who are in Satan's control. The media, not the government. I think the government's bought the media. They spent about 300 million quid on an advertising campaign. I wear a mask for other people, so they're not scared of me or of infection. If you love them, you would do likewise. Okay? Like the opposite views, and masks do work. They minimise the transfer of any virus, vivid SARS, flu, cold, or other coronavirus. Not good, brothers, not good, and not God. Your brother in Christ, John. Thank you, John. Thank you for every word, and I sincerely mean that. Hi, guys. 1,600 deaths from COVID. That's less than flu. When the WHO get the flu vaccine wrong, 28,000 over 2 to 3 months, 1 in 214. Norma. Not quite sure where that one is, Norma. Thank you so much. Right from the very beginning, the government never ever told us the truth, even about the first lockdown. They should have acted quicker and they knew about it. Liz, thank you, Liz. Something I want to know and need a medical person to explain, not me. Why did they put so many people into induced comas? My understanding after nursing a son after a coma is that bodies become weakened when in a coma, particularly muscles and respiratory muscles. This is above me. Was it because the patients' bodies could not cope, or was it the NHS could not cope? Not sure, Jill. God bless you. Thank you so much. Do you remember the Nightingales Hospital, Steve?
Yeah.
All over the country. Just great big pictures of ready for the onslaught.
Never really
I think 2 cleaners and a church mouse turned up with that one.
Yeah.
And guys, you're so right when you talk about propaganda. The government plan is hidden in plain sight, and it is plain sight. Government website, SAGE, subcommittee, Spy B. There's your Spy B, Behavioural Insights team.
Yeah.
Which uses applied psychology and boasts that they can change the thinking of the population without them realising it. Thank you, Dory. Great show, guys. Really good content. I'm glad that I'm not the only Christian who thinks this. Nikki from Ipswich. Steve, Nikki's right. You can get the idea from the propaganda that there's only about 46 of us in this country that think this. There's a few more.
There is, yeah.
There absolutely is a few
I was
more.
trying to get to the point of that we generally as a nation are apathetic, as opposed to, that's really where I was coming from on that. But, because we just go along with the flow. But people are waking up now, and that's good. But my question is, and I know time is going, is where is this heading next? because there is going to come a time when the story runs out, if you like, and they can't keep doing that. I mean, they'll keep bringing in variants, I'm sure. But how can they keep the lockdowns going and that? And that will be, with what's going on with G7 and that now, is global warming. That's where this is going to head to. It will be that, the global warming. That'll be the next crisis. In fact, if you listen to many of the people, that the world is on a knife edge. But if I could give you some quick facts, our world, because God created a brilliant world, runs in cycles.
Yeah, it does.
And so we have warmer cycles, we have colder cycles. And actually, the truth seems to be, from a lot of science, is that we're now heading into a colder cycle. For how long that will be. But it was interesting that there's been no end of studies on temperature rise. And I'll just give you one because time is short. And that is this. There's been a 70-year study in Sweden about temperature rise in Sweden. And they've done all sorts of things. They've used satellite data, they've used everything they've done. And the net change in temperature in Sweden over 70 years was zero.
Zero, yeah.
Absolute zero. They said that we would by now probably be 2 meters underwater because waters are rising. We're not.
We're not.
Again, but they'll use all of this. Now, yes, we need to look after our planet,
Amen.
Obviously. But this, again, is scaremongering into keeping us under control. And that's where this will go.
25 years ago, about Professor David Bellamy, the professor of botany, basically said that the idea of man-made global warming was poppycock. And I'm sure he had a good scientific reason why he could tell you. But we're treated to the likes of Greta Thunberg turning up at every government agency, bunking off school and telling us off of an auto cue why we should all be getting rid of our cars. It is actually quite sad. I'm going to leave you guys with a quote from Dr. Mike Yeadon. This is his point of view. I've got an O-level in biology. This is probably the most highly qualified immunologist and bacteriologist in the world. Former chief of Pfizer global head, and one of the world's most experienced immunologists. And he says this is his point of view. Still not persuaded? Ask yourself why all governments at once made the same mistakes in terms of policy responses, all of which inclined to maximise the number of deaths attributed to COVID-19. Why they persisted with lockdowns long after it had been proven that they do not work. Why masks were widely mandated even though they knew they don't work. Why they deployed a PCR mass testing system which still hasn't been characterised in relation to false positives. Why governments were comfortable with withdrawal of medical services, which has directly and predictably led to tens of thousands of avoidable deaths. Why they've lied about asymptomatic transmission, thus causing fear of everyone. Why they've spent money on maintaining fear and placing a tight clamp on media, extending to social media and even scientific journals, suppressing alternative medicines. Hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, both got great track records, safe as ours is apparently, and heal you from it and stop you getting it again, but you're not allowed to have those. Why they've expedited new technology vaccines and studiously ignored growing evidence of harms and indeed fatal responses. Why they've all but closed international borders based on immunological lies. Why they've hugely extended the duration of the confected crisis, even though we know that poverty alone leads to increased mortality. Why they're so careless about budgets, and why they've bribed the population with their own money to go along with this, because we will pay for this, Steve. We will pay for it. Why they've gone to extraordinary lengths to smear, damage experts capable of telling what they believe is the truth and counter official lies. I put it to you that the kind of person who can give orders which predictably led to avoidable deaths numbered in thousands have something in common. That attribute is that having got used to condemning thousands to die, will have no difficulty whatsoever in doing sand with death tolls numbering in their millions. As Stalin said, a single death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. He says more. I do believe he is a Christian because he ends that text in prayerful words. Steve, we're down to the last 20 seconds. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I've loved your presence, Steve. Thank you so much. Hope to have you back one day again. Hopefully with not such a contentious subject. But it's what the whole world's talking about.
Absolutely.
You do what is right between you and the Lord. Just whatever you feel take from us, take. If not, leave it. By God's grace and his goodness, I'll see you again next Wednesday. God bless you.